Alright, so we're looking at problem 3 in the homework for chapter 6. And I'm going to take the instructions, and first we'll get our GUI built, and then we'll figure out the logic. So don't even worry about the logic until we have decided on our GUI. So let's start up Eclipse. I'll do this completely from scratch, just so the sequence of operations getting through Eclipse is clear. One thing I have learned when I create on the classroom computer versus a project on my laptop, if I use the same Java version, things work out better. So do a new good morning. And I'll call it homework 6, problem 3. Actually, they're going to be all the problems. I'm just going to call it Manning homework 6 because I'm putting all the homework in one project. It'll be one main program. So here is where I choose my execution environment. I found out that if I'm using SE 1.8 or a different version that's on my laptop from the classroom, for example, I had 10 in here, and when I did an export and then imported it on my laptop, it didn't work. I couldn't just change my execution environment. It just was not happy. So when I build it on the classroom, I'm going to choose 1.8 because that's what I have on my laptop in the execution environment. So then next and finish. It doesn't ask me to create a module. Close these extra files I have laying around just for practice. And the first thing I'm going to worry about is the GUI, and then we'll come back to the actual code. So let's go ahead and create my main class. And I'm going to call it main GUI. And I'll put a static main in there. So what I'm going to do here is all that my main is going to do is create it's basically going to do a constructor of each of the problems. So I'm just going to say JFrame problem 1. I'll skip to 3. Problem 3 equals new JFrame problem 3. And the constructor of that JFrame, just like the examples in the book, do all the work of creating the GUI for that particular JFrame. So what I'm going to do here is, it's going to be I'll call that P3 for problem 3. How about HW3? So each of my problems is going to be its own little JFrame class. What I'm looking at here is problem 3 in chapter 6 homework. What I'm preparing for is they're basically, each little problem is going to be its own little JFrame. And to actually call it is going to be this code. So I'm actually building it from how I'm going to use it before I actually build this. So this will display problem 3 solution. And there'll be a problem 2 and a problem 1 before that. And I can delete this generated code by Eclipse. So this is my main. This is a class I need to create. What's cool about Eclipse is I can say, here's the class that I want to create, and I'm going to be assigning a new JFrame problem 3 to this variable. I don't have to go and say File, New Class. I can just hover over that and say, oh, Eclipse, could you build that class for me? as a fix to this problem, since I haven't defined that class, I can just say, I can come over here and just say, okay, yeah, create the class, because that's where I'm going to be putting my code. So kind of nice environment, letting you build your class without having to go File, New, Class, go through that menu. Since I know I want a class with this name, hover over that, and get Create Class. And it'll do that work for me. So I just click on that. It pops me into the menu, already giving the name of the class. If I wanted to make any other changes, I don't need another static main, so this is all good. And I click Finish. And there's my class that's going to go with that main. But since this is going to be a GUI, I'm going to add the extends JFrame, because this is going to be a JFrame with lots of graphical elements in it. And I will add the import of JFrame as I hover over the red squigglies. And if I know I'm going to be using lots of swing things, I can just do asterisk there, and all my swing variables or types will be available to me. So there's the main. I'm just setting it up to build the solution to problem 3. Give it a variable name, homework 3. It's going to be calling the constructor. There's my class, which the constructor will be building the GUI. All right, so here is the problem. I'm going to start it with a comment. Eclipse will automatically add the ending comment, and I can paste those instructions. And unfortunately, they all come in on one line, so I'm going to go break it up into multiple lines so it's readable here. Just by hitting enter, and Eclipse automatically adds an extra cute little asterisk at the beginning of the line. Here's the sample data from the instructions, and I just break that up into a readable comment at the top of my code. Not even going to worry about how the code does that yet. I'm just going to build the GUI first, and then we'll figure out the logic. So they've even explained how to actually do the logic. But I'm not going to worry about that yet. I'm just going to build my GUI. So here's where I have to figure out what is my user interface going to look like. So let's think about this here. I'm going to be giving a positive number in one base, converting it to another base. So what is my input? Well, they're giving me a positive number, the base of that positive number, and then converting it to a different base. So looks like the user is going to be entering 3 numbers. The number, what the base is for that number, the base I want to convert it to. All right, so let's just put in our notes of what our GUI will be. GUI is going to be a number, base of that number, and base, I'll call it base 2. Well, number, base 1, base 2, and there'll be a calculate button. And then a label of the result. Let's call it result. Now how we lay it out is our choice. Oh, there should probably be a label for instructions. Now, as we build a little more, lay them out by hand, it'll be, I'd say more friendly looking. but we can go ahead with a grid layout for now, because grid layouts are easy to deal with. What would our grid be? We have a label with instructions. It could say instructions colon and then another label with the instructions. Let's just use one label for now. I'm thinking that would go across the top. 3 numbers. Well, let's see here. I probably need a label to tell them where to put things. So I'll probably have a label to go with this. So I'll have a label saying here's the number. So a label and then a number, and then a label for the base. So there'll be a label and then say, enter base for first number, and then a label next to this number, enter the base for that number. And a calculate button and result. So it's looking to me like it's going to be a row with instructions, 3 rows of a label and what number they need to enter in each of those places. So 3 more rows, that's 4 rows. A calculate button and the result could be our 5th row. So let's make it a grid of 5 rows, 2 columns. So with that, now I can begin let's build my GUI in the constructor for this problem 3 JFrame. So I added this by hand. So this is going to be a JFrame, has all the capabilities now of a JFrame. So we'll get the labels and number or text fields arranged, and then we'll worry about the action listener for the calculate button, and then finally the actual code that does the work. So don't even worry about the code yet. Let's lay out the GUI. So here's my constructor, and I forget the name of my class. It's JFrame problem 3. So public JFrame problem 3. That's my constructor. Make sure I spelled it right. Yeah, JFrame problem 3. And I'll even put a little note here, constructor. So what do I do in the constructor? Well, let's one by one create my objects that need to be in the GUI. And as we go along, we'll figure out which ones does the button code need to actually access. So let's go ahead and create our instruction label, J label. I'll call it, I like to use the JL instructions equals new J label. And this will contain a little more information. Enter number, or how about this? Convert calculator. Enter numbers, please. We'll see if labels wrap. I don't remember if they wrap. And then I'll end that string. That will go on my label. And semicolon at the end. And then I have, for each line, I'm going to do a label and the number that they're going to, or the label that's telling them what needs to be entered in the text area, right? That's going to be right next to this label. So J label, I'll call it JL base equals new J label. Not the base, sorry, this is the number, colon. Enter and then semicolon. And let's do the J text area. I'll call it JT base equals new J text area, not text area, text field. Sorry, text field. Text area is a different kind of thing. New text field, And I'm not going to put any string in it, so I'll just leave it the parameterless constructor. But as I look at this, I realize when I click on that button, the button calculate method is going to need to read what they typed here. So I can't declare this variable inside of the constructor because then my calculate action handler can't get to it. So I need to make this variable, that needs to be, not the label, the text field, that needs to be a variable global to my class. So I'm going to declare that variable. How about up here after the instructions here? I'll call this variables needed globally. And there's one that needs to be a global variable, and I assign its value down here because the button click action needs to find out, well, what did they type? So that variable goes up there. The other ones, though, they're labeled, they never change, so I don't need to make them a global label, a global variable. Okay, so there's my first one. And now we continue on with similar to the other two. That would be the JL. Actually, this is supposed to be, there's going to be a number and a base. So I got this messed up here. They're going to type in a number, the base, and the base 2. So I'm going to call it JT number, and then base 2. The converted, it's going to convert to the second base. And just for clarity, for consistency, let's call that base 1 and base 2. And let's call that J number. There. I don't know why that turned blue there. Just to be consistent. Again, I'm asking for the number, then the base. There we go. So the J label JL base, I'll call that base 1 equals new J label. Base 1. So this is the base of that first number. And then where they're going to enter the information, JT base 1 equals new J text field and no text in there. Now let's make sure I haven't messed this up here. They're entering a number. A number is going to be, the instruction could be displayed in the label that I'm making up the name JL number. The text field is going to hold what they type, JT number. A label is going to display what they need to type there. I'll just put a colon there. The text field is going to hold what they type. I'm calling that J base 1. JT base 1. And then the third line is going to be another label, JL base 2 equals new J label base 2 colon and JT base 2, where they will type the requested base to convert the number to equals new J text field. So instructions, label text field, label text field, label text field. Now I'm going to have a calculate button and a label for the result. And the calculate button is a what is it? A J button. Equals new J button. Calculate. Or I forgot the name, the type. I gave the type name. What's the proper name of that type? What's that? Oh, there you go. There we go. Now, the result, again, that calculate button code needs to send the result to the result label, so I better make that a global variable up here. So J label, I'll call it JL result. I could have made it a JText field, but why put something there that the user could type in if they're not meant to type into it? So I'm going to make it a label where they can't change it. There's also ways to make text fields unchangeable. It depends on how you want it to look. We'll make it a label for now. So now it's JL result equals new J label, and I'll put click calculate, or how about I'll just put question mark at the start. We don't know what our result is at the start. So now we have all our GUI elements ready to go. So now let's set up our JFrame and fill it with these objects. So we already know that we are a constructor of an object that is a JFrame because we have extends JFrame. So I know I'm creating a constructor of that size, so I can do this dot set. How about we set our title? Let's set our title to have something meaningful. Oops. I would not set title. And the title is going to be base converter. Problem 3. In quotes. That's our title bar. And I do a this dot set size. And since I know I am how many rows? 5 rows by 2 columns, I'll make it a slightly tall and narrow. So I can do set size, hit enter if that top one's selected, and I know to enter width and height. I'm going to put, how about 200 wide by 500. That might be a little wide, but we'll go with that for now. Now, I need to set my layout before I can start adding my labels and buttons to it. So this dot, how was it? It was the add layout. Or how did we do our set our layout? I forget what the function was. I better look more closely. What's it? Set layout. Oh, okay. There it is. Set layout. And there's our set layout. I arrow down once to that. I hit enter, and now I have to have a manager. And remember how we do it? We just do new grid layout, and then the rows 5, columns 2. And it doesn't know what that is because that's in a different library. So I do the import of the grid layout from java.awt. And now, as I add elements, that layout manager will handle where to put things. Remember, without a layout manager, as I add things, they just get piled on top of each other. So grid layouts, or the layout manager, is very critical to the proper look of my GUI. Just making sense so far? I'm making labels. Now we just put a little comment here. Add items to my window. All right, so this dot add my JLabel instructions, JL instructions. Now, yeah. Oh, yeah. And now I realize that first row only has one thing in it. I'm going to need to add like a dummy empty label. So let's do a this.add new JLabel of nothing in it. This is an easy way to basically put an empty cell. Now row 2, this.add. And look at it, knows what variables I have available to me. I can come down here and do JL number, semicolon, this.add JL, or actually it's going to be the JT number, semicolon. There's row 2, this.add JL base 1, this dot add JT base 1. Oh, this is actually putting them in the window. Creating the object doesn't make it appear in my window. This means that when I set my window visible, they will be showing up in the window. So yeah, this is basically the object I've created now will be added or placed in my GUI. So the add sets them up to actually be the place. You kind of think of a JFrame as like my whiteboard. I have to create them. They're my little magnetic labels. I create my stickers or magnetic items. Now the add says, okay, now I'm putting them in the right place. Yeah, they're just in memory. They're ready to go somewhere, and I can add them to multiple places. But I'm just when I add it as a component to this window, and this dot add JL base 2, and this dot add JT base 2, the text area, text field, and now there's going to be the calculate button, right? So row 1, 2, 3, 4. Now this dot add I called it BTN calculate. That's the one I'm going to have to worry about add an action listener to, but I won't even worry about that yet. This dot add JL results. Now before even worrying about getting the code working or the action listener, let's go ahead and just show this window, this dot set visible to be true. Oops. Show the window. I don't know why that parenthesis showed up. So this will at least test whether I've got things arranged right. And if I want to, separate these by space, showing that this is one row after another, that's fine. Let's just see if we got working code by trying a run and see what happens. Let's see. Make sure my main. Back to the main here. It's just going to create a new JFrame. In the constructor of that JFrame, it's going to create all these GUI elements, add them to the window, and then show the window. So let's run and see what happens. No, it's running a different problem. What's going on? There we go. There's my window showing up. Kind of ugly. Grab it, move it over here. Oh, no, move it. Come on. I don't have a handle. I guess I can enlarge it. There we go. Now let's move. Now where did it go? There, finally let me move it. So it's a little tall, but there's my labels. There's where I can type in text. And if I click the calculate button, it'll show a result somewhere. So here's where I have that dummy empty label. Otherwise, I would have my rows showing up weird. I'm going to make the window a little shorter and a little wider. So I think I'll make it, what did I make it? So let's go ahead and I'll make it 400 wide, and I'll make it 300 tall. And just to see if that shows up well, I'll just run it again. That looks a little better. A little more like a nice GUI. Now I could come back here and worry about alignment of my labels, and there's easy way to set your alignment. But let's get functionality, and then we'll worry about alignment. Let's get this calculated button working. And that's where I have to add an action listener to my button. So let's create that action listener. And we have an example from the book, and this is where I'd have my book side by side with me to see the code that they did. When they gave you the example there in that first GUI, they showed that here's how you create an action listener. You have some variable, this is your choice of what to call it, that implements action listener. And we're going to create this action listener. That's where we're going to be dealing with how do we calculate the base. And then they show you the use of this, how we add it to a button. Right here, we just say calculate button. We do a add action listener to that button. So let's go to our code and do that same thing. We're going to create the action listener, and then we'll attach it to the button, connect it with our button. So back here, let's create the action listener. So class, we'll call it button, how about btn calculate action. Implements action listener. And see, it's capital A, action listener. And curly brace, hit enter. And we have some red squigglies. We're going to let Eclipse do some work for us now. We're declaring our variable. It's going to be an action listener, but in order for it to work properly, first I have to know what an action listener is by importing java.auth.event. And now that it knows what an action listener is, it knows that that's an abstract class. I hover over this. It knows that, hey, it needs to implement the inherited abstract methods. And so I just come down to here and say, yeah, give me that first fix. Add the unimplemented methods needed by an action listener, which is only the one. An action listener has to have an action performed event. So here's where I put my code. And the first thing I'm going to do, just to make sure that it works, I'm just going to do show some message in the JL result. And then I'll think about the actual logic of what needs to happen. So let's just do JL result dot set text calculating. And then the hard work of the actual logic is going to be going here. So I have I'm ready to create the action listener, so I can come back up to my, let me see if we can put both of those in view here. Once I have my action listener, up here, I do this. btn calculate dot add action listener new button calculate action. That's how I attach that code to the button. I add an action listener that I instantiate right there. I don't need to have two lines. I can say, oh yeah, give me a new calculate button action listener. So there's the code to attach an action to a button. Making sense? Here, this defines the code that's going to run. Right now, it's just a simple thing. Update my label. This code says, oh, there you've got a button that shows in some window. When you click on that button, now I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do whatever this tells me. Button calculate action, which is controlled by that. Let's see what happens. Here's the calculates, and the calculating label gets updated. Run it again, it just keeps resetting that calculate label. Now comes a time I now need to read these numbers and now do the logic of what's explained in the comments. So let's get to the point where we read the numbers, and then they basically gave you what you need to do to convert one number to another. But let's at least get this guy able to access those numbers. Remember how we made those variables global? It's going to read what they typed here into a variable. They're going to read each of these into a variable, and then do the calculation and put the result there. So let's see how we would read those numbers. We're going to declare a variable. Let's call it, they're all integers, right? Yeah, I think we're dealing with integers. So int, I'll call it inum equals, well, how do we convert that? Well, it's in a string. How do we convert a string to an integer? Do you remember how to convert a string to an integer? Something about parse. Yeah, there's like a parse int or something. If I had a string, is there a string that will parse it? It's going to be in a text field, and I need to get the text. Let's do it in two steps. Let's get the text and put it in a string. Let's do string. I'll call it snum equals, and it was JT number, right? Yeah, JT number, JT base 1, JT base 2. So JT number dot get text. So that's the string. Whatever they would have typed in that box now is going into snum. Now I need to convert that to an integer. What can I do? An snum dot to, well, I can convert to upper or lower case. But how do I convert a string to an integer? Remember the trick? There's the integer.parseInt. Maybe bringing some memories back. Integer.parseInt will take a string and convert it to an integer. And guess what the string is? snum. Now we're not doing any error checking. We're going to have to, if we want a good error checking, we'll put this in a try catch. But let's just assume they have typed in a valid number. Okay. Same thing with the others. Int, I'll call it I base 1 equals integer dot parse int, and then it's going to be, well, rather than having to declare a variable, I can just do JT base 1 get text. Being a little lazy here, rather than declare another variable, I can just say, oh, whatever they typed in there, convert it to an integer. And int I base 2 equals integer parse int again of JT base 2 get text. Now I have the numbers they've typed, and I'm ready to actually attempt the calculation. But again, for a little error check, I'll do a JL result dot set text, and I'll put you gave me, and I'll put inum. Oops. Not a comma, plus inum plus a comma plus I base 1 plus another comma plus I base 2. So now when I click calculate, I'll show I'm reading what they gave me as integers. And then all I have to do is do the calculation explained in the comments. Let's see if this part is working. Type in a number. I'll just call it, let's see, let's go 10, base 10. And if I want to convert it to a base, I'll say base 16. Well, that should come out to be an A in base 16. Let's make it a little simple. Let's do bases less than 10. Convert it to base 2. That should come out to be a 1010 in base 2. Right now when I click calculate, it just shows me, oh, you gave me 1010 So I've confirmed I'm reading what they typed. Now I'm ready to do actual calculation. I have converted what they typed into integers. Watch what happens if I don't have error checking on and I put a number that can't be converted into an integer, ASDF. Watch what happens. It's supposed to crash. It didn't crash. Oh yes, it did crash. Look at that. Look at all the nasty things come in. If I assume they've typed in a number and I try to do a parse int, lots of nasty crash. So we're going to be wanting to put a try catch around it. But for the initial writing of it, don't worry about error checking. Assume they have typed invalid input. So we can just do the very crash prone, assume they've typed a number and just parse it right away. And then here's where here's where we want to do more work now, is how to calculate that result. If it's a base 2 that I'm asking for here, I need to convert it to 1010. And they've explained how to do that way up here. Basically, you have a loop. Keep dividing by the second base. If the quotient, or if there's a non-zero result of the quotient, that becomes the digit in that location. So here's the loop. You could even use that same variable name if you like. Now we are over time. I could show you that if you want, or you want to work on that yourself, and we'll look at the solution Friday. But basically, you're writing a loop until quotient becomes 0. So think of this as a loop. Keep doing this until quotient becomes 0. Then your loop is done. So that's a clue to how to solve that. All right, have a great day. Don't want to get late for your first class. If you need any help with that,